Hello and welcome to the first ever Pedalabikeaway podcast, or Pedals Pod, as we might be calling it. This is new, something we haven't done before, so we thought we'd try something out. But I'm Rebecca, and
I'm Gareth, and I'm the owner of Pedalabikeaway.
Yes, and we're going to actually talk about Pedalabikeaway and the history of how it came to be, and just let everyone hear about what happened and how Pedalabikeaway came to be what it is today. So just before we start, we are actually in the Pedalabikeaway cafe, so there might be a bit of background noise as we're talking, but we felt it was really important to do this podcast in the cafe where we're based, in the Trail Centre. We can start with the story of Pedalabikeaway, Gareth, and how did it actually start?
Yeah, so the story's really quite interesting. I think it was set up in the late 1980s by Fred and Hilary Carpenter. And if you think late 1980s, you'll actually know, those of you who can remember that far back, that mountain bikes were really quite a new thing. Riding off-road was really quite new. And so they saw the potential in this kind of scene in the Forest of Dean, and the need to be able to cater for the riders. And I think, if we look back then, like, there was no official trails, there's no official trail network. There was tracks probably scraped into the to the hill that people rode. It was very much a burgeoning scene, and they really tapped in right at the start there, and kind of saw an opportunity.
Ah, wonderful. Very glad that they did see that opportunity. When did you actually take over then?
Yeah, so Ian bought Pedalabikeaway when Fred and Hilary retired in 2010, 2011. They'd been running it for the best part of 14, 15 years then. They wanted to retire, and they wanted to give it to someone, or for someone to take it on, that was really going to kind of take what they'd built and really start to run with it. I joined Ian shortly after as his business partner, was here to basically to be able to kind of run and develop Pedalabikeaway to what it is now. Oh
yeah, and the rest, as they say, is history. Were there any really memorable moments from those first few years when you took it over?
I'll take us back a little bit further. I think to give a kind of bit of more context and history, it was like my first ever mountain bike race was in the Forest of Dean. I think that was in the early 90s. I think it was about 93 or 94, and it was just a local mountain bike race. We raced up and around on the slag heaps that are close to the centre now, I remember kind of like being like, it was a real eye-opener, because I think, I must have been like, 12 or 13, this mountain biking was this cool new thing still, came to race here and couldn't believe quite how gnarly and steep the hills were, both up and down, I fell in love with mountain biking through riding here in the Forest of Dean, and really saw kind of like, you've seen now how it's kind of developed over that time period. So it's massively developed. I think when Ian and I got involved with the business, the only official trail was what's now known as the Collier's Trail, was known as the Family Cycle Trail, which Fred and Hilary were instrumental in getting the funding for and getting that kind of set up. So as it all runs on old disused railway lines around the forest, that was all part of its industrial heritage, and turning that industrial heritage into something that was going to be useful for people to be able to come and enjoy. And the first official mountain bike track didn't actually come into place in terms of I suppose recognised by Forestry Commission as it was then, until 2011 with the Verdurous Trail. So that was the first official trail that went into to the hill. Everything else that was up on the hill, the old Vodka Trail as it was known, was all unofficial. It'd all been dug a little bit under the radar, ridden and raced, but there was no formal waymarking. There was none of that kind of side of it. So that really didn't come along until 2011, with that kind of the Verdurous Trail going in, and the adoption of the downhill trails to be recognised as formal downhill lines. And those people who know, it's like Ski Run and Sheepskull were two of the original downhill tracks that had gone in the 90s, but again, it had been very much kind of underground. It had never been formally recognised. People just came here, knew about them, and came and rode them. Things really kind of like developed from there. So.
Yeah. How do you think the trails evolving like that has affected the vibe here over the years?
Yeah, I think one of the things about it, and one of the things I think we'll touch on a little bit further through the podcast, is that the trail network here has always been constantly evolving. Because let's be fair, it's like they weren't the first official. The Verdurous Trail was probably pretty late to the game if you think about it. The Red Bull / the now called the Tower Trail up at Coy de Brennan. That went in the late 90s as a formal mountain bike trail. It was was the first official mountain bike centre in the UK. And the Verdurous didn't go until 2011. So we're talking 15 or so years later than the first official trail trail network going in. So we're a little bit I guess behind the times, that perspective, in terms of the forestry formally recognising mountain biking as a sport within the Forest of Dean. But part of the beauty of that was that there'd been this big unofficial trail network that'd been built out there by volunteers. We talked Ski Run, Sheet Skull, all the downhill lines that are here at the centre were all officially or were dug under the radar. They weren't official trails, and didn't get adopted until a lot later down the line with the establishment of the Dean Trail Volunteers, and the agreement there to be able to look and manage that, I suppose, we'd say it's an off-piste trail network, but it mean more natural trails. And that's one of the elements there where the Forest of Dean, I think, has always done really well, is it is constantly, trail network's always constantly evolved. The type of trails that we've got have evolved over time, and there's always been that almost underground scene where there's a lot of trail development gone on, both officially now, obviously with the work with the Dean Trail Volunteers, but also a big unofficial underground scene with development of trails all around the forest, which what makes it such a big attraction for mountain bikers to come and ride.
Oh, definitely. And it's really hard to balance that, building new trails that are going to excite existing riders and building trails that are helpful for newcomers that are starting the sport. And how do you think is a good way to balance that?
Yeah, well, it's almost like, it's always that pyramid effect, isn't it? Is that if you build a green trail or a blue trail, you're always going to get much bigger numbers of people riding that because it's so much more accessible. And I think, it's one of the things we've been really lucky at here. The first official trail to go in was a blue trail. We obviously had the family cycle trail before that, but those two things were basically effectively a family cycle trail to go and explore the forest, and then the first official mountain bike trail going in as a blue trail. That meant that people, it attracted the masses, because it's accessible, and the Verdurous has been voted a number of times as one of the best blue descents in the UK. That last Dragon's Tail descent is fantastic, puts a big smile on your face. You do want to go around and be able to ride it again. So I think, you've always got to start at the bottom, haven't you, and then build up. And I think because the way the trails here officially evolved, that was the way that it happened here, is, family cycle trail, Verdurous Trail, official adoption of some of the downhill lines, and then the maintenance that went on with those to be able to keep them always riding as good as they are riding. And it's naturally evolved from there. But I think, the other one is, back in, I'm trying to think of the dates now. I think it's 2021. We had Countdown and Launchpad go in, and that again. If you see the number of riders, if you look at the number of riders that ride each track, obviously the higher numbers are always on that more blue style descent, and Launchpad and Countdown was fantastic example of that, where a new trail was put in, both through the hard work of the Dean Trail Volunteers, but also fundraising to be able to get Launchpad in, to be able to create something that again was a little bit more accessible, that could be used by disabled users to be able to ride on as well. And that was a real, again, step forward to be able to have that in there as well.
That's wonderful. We've seen off-piste, you mentioned them earlier, and freeride trails growing in popularity and being sketched in where, maybe under the radar, as you said. Why do you think these trails still remain so popular?
I think that what the off-piste trails always do, isn't it? They evolve quicker than the rest of the trail network, because people are going out there to build what they want to ride. And as the sport evolves, then those trails evolve. And obviously, the thing with off-piste tracks is that they're natural. So sometimes, they're not as well looked after, cared for, etc., as a kind of a pisted trail, not as hard wearing. That means actually then that that perhaps they kind of like the trails have almost like I don't like to say a shelf life, but there's almost like that track's been ridden, it's a great off-piste track, everyone will go and ride it, and then actually it gets ridden to death, it gets rutted, it gets puddled. There's not the maintenance that happens with some of the waymark trails, so someone will go and try and build a better one, and then that kind of element develops. And I know from the forestry perspective that's a real challenge, because obviously they don't want people just going out and digging lines out on the hill. But really we're really thankful for that from a kind of like a business perspective, because that's how all the trails, downhill trails originally here all came to be adopted. If people hadn't been going out digging on the hill, we would have never got Ski Run and Sheet Skull and Corkscrew and all those other tracks that people would kind of now see as renowned with the Forest of Dean. So it's almost an evolution and a process, isn't it? But the off-piste trails always remain popular because they evolve with the style of riding, and so that's one of the kind of key things, really.
I think a big thing with the style of riding is how bikes have developed as well and moved on so quickly. And, how do you think these bike developments are influencing riders today?
Yeah, I mean, I can just look at it over the lifetime of me riding a bike. And, my first kind of like proper mountain bike was a Diamondback Topanga, and it had a triple chain set, brakes that hardly worked, fully rigid bike, no drop of seat post. The type of trails that you could ride on that and very different to the type of trails that you can ride on a modern trail bike now. So, as geometry, suspension, drop of seat posts, all those kind of things have evolved. They've, opened up, I suppose, a new level of riding for the average rider. You don't have to be a fantastic rider because you've actually got such great kit now that it actually opens up a lot of riding for you. So, yeah.
Definitely.
I think that's part of it.
I took a gravel bike one time down Verderers after going down on my normal mountain bike, and I had to say it was probably the most terrified I've ever been on a bike on the hill without all the tyres and the suspension and everything else that I was so used to. So definitely. Talking of bike developments as well, you've obviously got e-bikes and what they're bringing to the bike market, and riders now with being able to get up the hills quicker, do more laps. I mean, how do you feel e-bikes are impacting the trail networks and riders?
Yeah, like I said, we only ever really, or I'll only really talk about the positive, because the one thing e-bikes have done is they've opened up mountain biking to a wider audience. So, there's people who might not have been able to have the accessibility, the time, the fitness. There's a whole host of reasons why e-bikes have become incredibly popular. And, some of that is to do with the evolution of the e-bike as well. If you looked back 10 years or so ago when the first e-bikes came out, they weren't the most reliable. They were heavy. You couldn't get very far on a battery. You didn't have a huge amount of power. But actually, as that has evolved, it's kind of really opened doors to you, both your riding, but also to a whole new group of riders. Perhaps that you might have done the sport 20 years ago and moved away from it. But also, they said those people who thought, wouldn't have thought about getting on a mountain bike, but actually an e-bike has allowed them to be able to get into mountain biking and then kind of really kind of get addicted to it and see why it's such a great thing to be able to do, both from the health benefits, but also in terms of getting out there in nature and the kind of the buzz that you get from riding a bike.
Oh, it is definitely addictive riding bikes. I find that anyone who I've introduced to the sport has fallen in love with it as much as me. And the other side of the sport is the community as well, and going out with friends and then coming back to somewhere like this, a cafe, and having a coffee. But what do you feel really makes the mountain biking community such a wonderful place to be part of?
I think you said it's one of the things I've always found about mountain bikers is that it's always been super welcoming. So, it's not cliquey. It's not about kind of like, I've been involved in road, track, all those kind of different disciplines over the years. There, for example, you go into a road club, they didn't want you riding with you unless you could kind of show that you were able to be able to ride at the right level for that kind of club session. So it was almost quite kind of almost like you had to batter the door down to be able to get in. There's none of that with mountain biking. It's like, it's just accessible. It's easy to be able to get into. And yes, there's obviously a cost element because, bikes aren't cheap. There's no getting away from that. But compared to some sports where I don't know, if you get your kids into gymnastics or any of these other activities where there's subscription costs and stuff all the time that you're paying out for. Once you've got your bike, it's just you've got your bike, you've got your kit, you can go ride. And it's a bit of an investment up front, but actually that just brings it is accessible for a huge range of people, and that welcoming aspect has been massive. But I think one of the things that kind of to touch on here is one of the things that has really helped grow that welcoming atmosphere was that the implementation. One of the things we really want to do was implement a kids club, and the Little Fodders kind of kids club really, when it was established, is now over 10 years. It's 11 years old. Really again attracted a new audience to the centre. It's about kids riding bikes and having fun. Then the parents are down here, so they think, oh, actually, I've got a couple of hours free. Rather than walk the dog or go for a run, they perhaps pick up and want to be able to go and ride a bike and kind of get into it because the children are starting to get into it, and it brings a far more kind of welcoming and family vibe to the centre than potentially to other places, or even here when we first took it on. I remember coming down here in I think it was about 2012, 2013, and there was loads of guys outside with body armour. Do you remember the ones that made you look a little bit like you were in the Ninja Turtles?
Yes.
Yeah. And so like they're in there with this kind of Ninja Turtle kit on, full face helmets. That environment, actually, as soon as you see all of that, if you were coming into it as a new rider, it's really off-putting. It's quite intimidating. But actually, you come down now and you see it on a Saturday, and there's loads of kids. There's loads of different. There's people. There's women, men, all going out riding out. It's a far more even mix. There's kind of like I said, it's really kind of accessible, and there's a far more kind of diverse audience. Than perhaps a more traditional style of kind of bike park where it might be more uplifty or stuff, whereas actually still it feels a little bit machoistic sometimes. And that's something that we've been really keen to create through that, but also through really promoting and trying to encourage women's riding groups and stuff to use the centre. Those kind of elements have really added to that community and hopefully helped it make it feel like a less intimidating place, a more welcoming place to be able to come and ride a bike.
It's definitely welcoming. Where do you see the trail centre heading in the next few years?
God, there's a two questions there, isn't there? Where would I like to see it, or where, and you have your riding hat on as well as your kind of like your business hat on. But there's also a recognition there that, we are working with kind of public land, managed by Forestry England. So, the public bodies aren't always as quick moving necessarily. So, and that's no disrespect. Forestry have done an amazing job here at the centre, to be able to kind of get it and support us to create it to the way that it is today. I think it'd be balanced with kind of what we'd like to do, but actually, the reality of how fast change will happen. But one of the things is, to answer more directly, is that we want to see the trails continuing to develop. We know that people only want to come and ride because the trail network is great. So no matter how good the food is, or the shop is on site, or the hire bikes are, all the other stuff, the ancillary stuff around the side. reality people come to the Forest of Dean time and time again is because of how good the trail network is. So, that's always going to be our number one priority. We want to support that. We really want to support the Dean Trail volunteers. We want to encourage, cajole, push the Forestry England to be able to come along, and Dan and the team do a great job. We want to kind of develop that side of it as well. But, that's our kind of job, is really keep pushing the trail network, keep developing the trail network. A great example is, the new GBU jump line that went in just over 18 months ago. That was kind of like evolution. It's like GBU had always had a jump line, but actually, never had any sizable gaps in it. the new bottom section there, it's got some proper decent gaps in there, things that people find a little bit intimidating the first couple of times they ride it. And so, there's plans to revamp some of the other trails there as well. And, I think we talked about earlier, hopefully on one of the later podcasts, we'll get the Dean Trail volunteers to come in and perhaps expand on that and talk about how they really want to expand that trail network a little bit.
I know that they've got a lot of exciting things in the pipeline for how they want to improve trails and add features. So it'd be really interesting to get them in to talk to them. And obviously we've seen other new trails at the Trail Centre with the new green, Old Bob's. That's been fantastic for new riders, as well as that red trail boneyard. It's been busy actually, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think, if you look back, it's like, I think it's 2018 I was looking the other day was, what we worked really, really hard because we'd established the kids club. We worked really, really hard to be able to actually build a skills area on the site. So we did some fundraising. We attracted, put our own money in to be able to do that, to build the first ever skills area on site. And that was initially visioned as an area we could take the kids on to be able to coach them as a great way of them being able to develop their skills, be able to some little jumps, little drops, that kind of stuff. Reality was that we could hardly ever get the kids on it because it became so popular, because it was like people want to come and ride and session that and improve their skills and ride the berms and ride the drops to be able to improve their riding before they go out onto the trails. So yeah, things like that, and then from there things are really kicked on. Dean Trail volunteers had some fantastic new trail developments over the years. We said, you mentioned Boneyard, which went in. Obviously, I'd love to see the stats on Boneyard and to the number of riders that have ridden it, because it's just such a fun addition, and is probably the one thing where the red trail used to feel really XC orientated, because obviously when it was first built as a vodka trail, it was all about XC bikes. You were talking in the 90s, it was like everyone rode an XC bike, that was where the big scene was. And now actually that trail's really evolved, and actually it's got the red skills area in there, you've got kind of like that new line in, it feels a lot more like the modern day style of riding, and it's a great way of showing how the trails have evolved. But yeah, Old Bob's, just again another fantastic addition. And that really has been, again, it's got to be real credit to Forestry England. They managed to get some funding. They saw the gap between the family cycle trail, now the Colliers Trail, and the verdurers, and that's really kind of like helped plug a hole and get more people onto their first ever mountain bike experience without it being too climby or too descendy, being too far away from the centre. So you get that experience, and feel what it's like, and hopefully that gets you into going, oh, I want to try this a little bit further, and you'll then move on to the blue trail and the red trail and so on, and develop over time. But let's be fair, it's one of the things that Ian and I were really attracted us to Pedalabikeaway was that it was one of the only places in the country where you get that complete experience. You had the family cycle trail, you got the Vergers Trail when it was coming in, then you had the free miners, and you got the downhill lines, all in one really quite close geographical area. And there's not many other places you could go still and ride your bike where there's that breadth of trail network in different levels to be able to, in such a close area, to be able to kind of almost develop your riding in one spot. And I think that's part of the reason why we've seen some really good riders come through the Forest of Dean over recent years, is because that you've got that real progression in terms of riding, which is fantastic.
Oh, definitely. It really does help those riders. Are there any trends you're seeing coming up with riding or trail design or culture that you're really excited about?
I said, the big one we've already touched on is e-bikes. It's like I said, e-biking is changing our sport, and there's no getting away from it. And if you haven't ridden one yet, you should, because actually, if you can have more than one bike, and we all know N+1 is the perfect number of bikes to be able to have, you should definitely have an e-bike in your garage. So that's, I think, only going to continue to grow, and that's kind of like one element of it. The other thing he said, we've seen kind of no change in the type of trail that people want to ride. The Boneyard is a great example of that. You've got something where you got some real nice kind of natural feeling berms, some tech in there, a little jump and stuff at the bottom. That kind of fast, flowy kind of but natural style of riding is kind of really, really, really popular. And I think you want to see more of that kind of like coming along as well. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see, you know, where it goes. There's always something new in there. If you look at how fast the sport has developed since the you know, the 80s in the UK to where it is now, you know, there's always going to be kind of like something new, and kind of like our job is to try and, you know, stay abreast of those kind of changes, and kind of like keep the centre, keeping track with that kind of development, and keep it fresh for people to want to keep coming back and ride.
And it's really interesting as well when you see on the like younger end of the spectrum, you're seeing things like these balance bikes coming through, where we're seeing kids absolutely shredding down trails that, you know, on a full 29er, I was a bit hesitant about when I first started riding, and there's this kid on a balance bike smashing it, or the shotgun seat and having your child on the front now. We're seeing people riding red trails with their kids on the front, and just that progression is huge now in the sport.
You know, and let's be fair, it's like, you know, one of the biggest things we sell in the shop is the tow ropes. You know, and with the evolution of the e-bike, what were we able to do? You were able to tow your kids to the top of the trails, because what was the worst thing with your kids is that they'd love riding downhill. But getting to the top of the hill, particularly with small little legs, small little wheels, is really, really, really hard work. So, you know, one of the things e-bikes have been great for, getting your kids to be able to access more trails, that's pushed their riding on, that's developed their riding, that's really hooked them on the sport. And you things said like the shotgun and like the balance bikes, they've all really had, you know, massive impact. But I think what's had the biggest impact is, like, if I would go back to when I started riding the mountain bike, like, there just wasn't the trails to push yourself on. Obviously, there wasn't the bike tech, and, you know, all the bikes. Well, we'd look at them now, and you wouldn't ride them down any trail, let alone think that you could take them down a gnarly kind of mountain bike track. But yeah, the having the trail network and having the breadth of trails and the choice of trails, that's just really, you know, I think it's why, in my opinion anyway, why the next generation of riders, or the generation of riders coming through, they've never had it so good. And I know probably people say that about life in general, don't they? You know, iPhones and this and that, and, you know, but reality is like, you know, we just didn't have access to good jumps unless you built them yourself in the woods, and then they were really shoddy and fell down in about, you know, 5 jumps or something, or you were putting them on the street or whatever. You know, we're building them with little kind of blocks. You know, they've got access to great jumps. They've got access to great kind of trails, progressive trails as well. You've got access to bikes now that ride really, really, really well, and that's why you see these riders come through. And you look at like Jackson Colston dominating the World Cup circuit this year, you know, young, super talented riders. You know, he grew up in Whistler, you know, almost like, you know, Forrest Dean on steroids, but where he's got access to great trails, and, you know, was riding at a level that constantly pushes and evolves. And, you know, that's where we're going to see things, well, I think, kind of almost developing, is that actually we've got to keep now trails being kind of enough of a challenge to be able to keep up with the next generation of riders that are going to come through, that are going to be like, nah, this is easy now. And you're going to be like, wow, that's massive.
I was about to say, you see some of these kids and they're on these tiny wheels and they're going down like the GBU drop, and you're there thinking, how on earth are they doing it? But they just love it. They're absolutely smashing it.
And they don't have to fear at that age, do they? So they, you know, they don't have to pay the bills either. So they don't.
That helps.
It doesn't matter if they break themselves and stuff.
They tend to bounce a bit more, don't they? So.
They tend to.
Now, speaking of bits and pieces you can buy, I have heard that there is a new shop appearing on site for Pedal Syndicate. Would you like to talk us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think, look, to be fair, one of the things we always felt, we wanted to do the shop better than what we currently, the current offering that we had on the site. We just never had the space, you know, and I think that if we actually went back, and we probably didn't touch about it enough when we talked about the history, but, you know, this site used to be an old coal mine. So it was a colliery until the 1960s. The buildings are from that era. So, you know, where we are now in the cafe, this was the old colliery offices. It's where the miners came in to get paid. It's where the manager would have run the operation from. You know, the kind of, if you look across the road at the highways yards, you know, their big building there was the old shower block. You know, the mine shaft was in the middle of what is now the main car park in the centre here. So, you know, the template was never a purpose-built trail centre. It wasn't like some of the newer places that are established. You know, whether you look at Bike Park Wales or even Coed y Brenin, they were purpose-built mountain bike centres. This was an old industrial site that was then later developed into mountain biking, and we just never had the space. We just didn't have the space to do a bike shop really well, and that's one of the reasons Ian and I opened up Pedal Syndicate down in Monmouth. Was we needed a bigger premises to be able to do the bike shop really well, to be able to retail bikes really well, and it took, again, and unfortunately you won't mind me saying this, years of cajoling and pushing them to be able to say, look, we want to do something bigger and better on site. And we were able to get to a stage where they've leased us a bit of land in the main car park, and we were able now to be able to build a new shop on the site. And I think that's just going to really add to the offering, because it means that you're going to have a proper retail experience on site. We've got a proper cafe here already, so the cafe we've always tried to evolve. We've obviously just done some recent works over the last year or so where we've kind of redeveloped the cafe. We've bought the horse trailer and the pizza box element, built an outside cafe, put the stretch tents in. So all of those kind of things we've kind of like done and evolved and put money back in to the centre to keep it evolving. I think this for us was the next natural stage to be able to have a proper bike shop, proper destination mountain bike store on site with everything you'd expect in that kind of like location, from the kids bikes all the way through, the kind of like Troy Lee clothing, Patagonia clothing, kind of knee pads, the protection, great choice of tires and saddles and things, the consumables that you sometimes turn up at the centre, didn't realise that actually the trails were going to be as hard as they were, and you thought, actually I want to put some proper protection, the helmets, those kind of things, and also some of the kind of like the cooler stuff, the glasses and the goggles and things that people want to go, oh, actually, yeah, I've been wanting a set of those, and my local shop just doesn't have that because they're not a destination mountain bike store. So hopefully that's going to really add the next level to us. And one of the other kind of key elements around that is that we really understood, and we have understood, we wanted that buying a bike is a big investment. And what you really want to do is you want to be able to ride it, the bike, before you go and buy it. And demo days are great for that, but generally you've had to travel, haven't you? You have to travel to wherever the next demo day is going to be. And we wanted to be able to have the range of demo bikes in for stuff that we'd be selling in the shop, where you can come and ride that demo bike on the trails, your local trails, kind of from the centre, kind of get that proper demo experience. And in fact, if you enjoyed it, if that wasn't the right bike for you, you could try another one. Till you make sure you've got the bike that's perfect for your style of riding, and then obviously you can get the bike from us, hopefully. But my main thing was that you could then we can properly set it up for you. So you buy the bike from us, Rebecca, and then we go, right, cool, we'll set it up, we'll do some base settings in the store, actually go out and do a lap of one of the trails that you normally ride, pop back down, we can tweak a few things, go out, you can go and do another lap, pop back to the centre, we can tweak a few more things, so that by the time you finish picking your bike up on that Saturday or Friday or whenever you've come down to the shop, actually you're able to get it completely dialed. And that's not something you can generally get done at a standard bike shop, because no matter how good you can set it up in the car park, you need to be able to go and ride it on a trail to be able to get the kind of proper feel. And then your first ride always ends up being this constant tweaking and changing and stuff till you get it dialed. So to be able to offer that professional support and really look after people on site is, just like you said, super exciting to be able to do that and offer it as a complete package, from demo to buy to then set up, and then you guys to be able to be riding down at the centre and being pop into the shop anytime you need to, and it being right on hand I think it's something it was going to be super cool.
I think it'd be a mountain biker's dream, to be fair, to be able to pick up a bike and get straight on a trail network without having to pack it in your car, cross a road. It's just right there, isn't it? Out the shop, take a left. Yeah. You're at the trailhead, Yeah. What a brilliant thing to offer.
I'm biased, but I think we've got one of the best trail networks in the UK in terms of the plethora of riding and offer, and the progression and range of riding. So, having that on your doorstep, we sometimes forget about it, is because we're here every day, but it's actually so, most people would kill to be able to walk out their office door straight onto some mountain bike trails, go and get a lap after work. It's the dream, isn't it? So yeah, to be able to have that and know that you can go somewhere where you can get it properly set up, properly looked after, and ride it on proper tracks is super cool. So yeah,
it is. And speaking of setup, it's a proper miserable day today. It's pouring with rain. What is your advice for people for winter riding?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, good one. Actually, I say go and read our latest newsletter from Pedal Syndicate. But we did actually something on that. There's a couple of little bits, isn't there, on there? But one of the key things is have some proper winter tyres. They make a huge difference. And so, you want something that's going to kind of grip really well over the winter. You're less concerned about rolling resistance than you might be when it was a little bit drier. That's going to make a huge difference. A mud guard. Number one, whether it's a RRP or it's a mud hugger, Rapid Racer Products, or a mud hugger, a proper mud guard stops the mud getting into your eyes. Huge difference for winter riding. And I'd say ride flats in the winter. I know there's still a lot of people out there that ride clips. Give yourself an opportunity, try flats, because the winter is the best time to try that, because you're often slipping and sliding around. But you teach yourself some real good core skills, keep your feet in contact with the pedals, and it gives you added confidence of being able to, dab the foot when you need to, rather than trying to clip out or fall over. So that kind of is a massive help as well. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel like winter's the time you can really hone your skills, like with night riding as well, because it's so dark all the time. It really helps teach you how to look around those corners and look ahead at the trail, because all you can see is what's in your lights.
Yeah, it's super fun. I was like, we just done obviously our first night ride for the year, and we're doing the next one. I think it's 27th of November. So it's Thursday night. You come down, you can ride with the group. It's cool. Night riding is really, really cool. And it gives you that opportunity, hopefully, to be able to get out in the week and still get a little bit more riding done. Because otherwise, traditionally, people tend to ride out, they can only be a bit of a weekend warrior. And by that, I mean that they only get the opportunity to ride on the weekend because it's the only time it's light enough for them to do so. But actually, we had the exposure lights out there for the demo. And they're amazing. They light up the trail. And again, yes, they're a bit of an investment, but I still got my original ones, which I think were the Mark III ones, and they're still going strong, whatever it is, like 12, 13 years later. So actually, you invest in a good set of lights rather than some Chinese knockoffs, and actually, you'll still be using them in 10 years' time, which, then the investment seems worthwhile, doesn't it? So, but yeah, definitely. Night riding's cool, really, really cool, and great fun to be able to do, but sometimes can be a little bit intimidating sometimes. So, getting out there in a group is a great way to be able to do that, particularly if you don't know the trail network that well.
Definitely. So you do those the last Thursday of every month, is it?
Yeah, last Thursday of every month. I think it's different in December. I think it's 17th of December, just because obviously Christmas, and doing something before Christmas. But it's traditionally it's last Thursday of every month, all the way through till March, and then obviously hopefully evenings become light enough again, and you've still been able to get some riding in. Gives you more flexibility in the summer, doesn't it? You can ride then later into the evenings, and really maximise it. Oh,
lovely. Well. We'd really love to hear what everyone at home thinks about this. This is our first episode, as we said earlier, that we've done. We are hoping to do more podcasts. So if you've got any feedback watching this, please let us know. Leave a comment on the YouTube video or send us an email. I think it's info@pedalabikeaway.co.uk is our email address.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that, or shop at pedalsyndicate.co.uk. So either one will get through to us. But leave us a comment. It'd be fantastic. Like I said, we'd love to do something perhaps with the Dean Trail volunteers. There's so many good riders in the Forest of Dean now. So I think we could definitely see getting some riders on board. Or again, one of the coaching companies and giving you some top kind of coaching tips. So hopefully we'll develop this. You guys will enjoy it and want a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you want us to talk to anyone in particular, let us know and we'll see what we can do.